Hi folks, Melvin here from Optoproductions.com, and today we're gonna build a modular techno live set here inside VCV Rack. Alright, so I first wanted to make a video about creating buildups and drops and mapping everything to a MIDI controller with the help of Patchmaster, but I figured building the patch itself could be interesting for a lot of people as well. So that's what I'm gonna show you today. I like minimal patches, and I've tested out a couple of ideas before settling on this patch. So let me start from the top. On the left, we've got a main clock, which is running our entire patch. I'm just using one output right now, and this is first routed to the drum sequencer from SV Modular. And I've got 4 drum tracks, so a kick, snare, and 2 hi-hats. You could use whatever modules you want here, or use your own custom drum patches, but I'm just gonna keep things simple, so we can focus on the live aspect. And this is also why I chose this drum sequencer, and that's because it's real easy to see what's going on. And you can easily tweak things, and even store and recall presets. So, that's definitely a plus. I did notice one bug though, and that's why I'm using the gates module here, because if I fill out all the steps, and we send this to the snare, for example, directly, you'll notice that the snare stops at the last step. I'm not sure why this is, but I just found a way around this with a gates module, which makes every gate the same length. But yeah, all the drum outputs are being sent to Mindmeld Mixmaster Junior, and this really is the heart of the setup. So you can easily label channels on top by just clicking and entering a name. And you can also right-click on the channel label, and here you can adjust the gain, and you can apply some filters, so which are used on the hi-hats, for example. And this is a really helpful feature, especially when you're playing live on larger PA systems. So that helps to keep the low end clean. Yeah, one thing I can do, which I haven't done right now, on the hi-hat modules we've got a mute input. So if I connect the trigger output from the closed hi-hat to the mute input on the open hi-hat, we can create a choke. So without the mute, with the mute. So that could be useful. Alright, well, then let's move on to the middle layer. And here I've got a bass on the left and some chords on the right. Initially I wanted to use the 32 channel phrase sequencer, which you can split into 2, but unfortunately you can't select a different sequence length for both parts. It's always the same length. So that's why I'm using 2 in this case, and I'm actually running exactly the same sequence here. And that's a cool feature of this module. You can just right click, go to portable sequence and select copy, and then you can paste it on another module. But the idea behind this is that I can change the length of the sequence to build out the song. So I can keep the bass really short in the beginning. So it's just 5 steps. And I'm also using the gate probability. So I've only got one note active right now. But if I turn this up, it will randomly add more notes, like I've shown in the previous video. But now if I want to progress the song, I can just increase the length. But it still uses mainly the same notes, so it will still fit together. And yeah, I can do the same with the bass, of course. So I can start out really simple. So this is one control I want to map to a MIDI controller, but I'm gonna do that in the next video. But yeah, as a bass sound I'm using Basal from Vult, or Basal, however you want to call it. And I especially like the mod feature, as you can use this for breakdowns to decrease the low end. Okay, so the output goes to the acid filter, and I'm using slab as an envelope and a VCA. And if you want, you can even use this envelope for another synth as well, since it has 2 channels. But usually you want to separate controls over multiple synths. But yeah, that's it for the bass. Pretty simple. Now for the chords, I'm using OSC3 by Starling Via, which I've also made another video about. And this one has 2 outputs. So a main output and a harmonized output. And we can change this harmony with the detune control. this gives a lot of possibilities live. And yeah, we've got an easy accessible octave button. And we can change the shape. So I might want to start out like this. And in this case I'm using another filter, tangents, so a Steiner-Parker filter from Volt. And this is a self-oscillating filter, so you can even use it as a bass if you want. But I am using the second gate output from the phrase sequencer, and this is going into the K length and the cutoff. So we get some accents. Okay, but yeah, both the bass and the chords are sent to the mixer right here. And I'm using the aux expander to add auxiliary tracks. So we can add like 4 aux sends, but I'm using only 2 right now, so a reverb and a delay. So right here we can see the channels, so I've got the bass and chord, so I can add some reverb. But what I really like about this mixer is the group tracks. So we've got 2 group buses right here, and these are really useful for creating buildups and drops. Because often when you're in a breakdown, you've got everything running except for maybe the kick and bass. And then when the drop kicks in, I usually like to go back to just kick and bass only. So underneath the channel, we can assign it to a group channel. So I've got the snare and the hi-hats both set to group 1, and also the output from the effects. So I can easily mute this. And the kick and bass are sent to group number 2. So I don't have to press 2 mute buttons, but just 1. But the main feature I've got right here is this push button. Mixmaster has polyphonic inputs for their mute CV inputs. But the cool thing is that it actually reverses the current mute state. This means that when I send a trigger to all 8 channels, and I've got everything running except for the kick and bass, as would happen in a breakdown. So I can like play around with the reverbs and the delays. I can add some snares. Then when I want the drop to come back in, I just press push. But yeah, one thing I'm missing right here is I also want to mute the reverb and delay return. And one thing I can also do is send a second merge module to the bus mute inputs. These inputs over here get muted as well. So let's say you're in a breakdown and I've got a really long feedback on my delay. Now when I press push, it goes back to just kick and bass. So this is ideal for a more minimal drop. And while the reverb and delays are muted, I can turn back the feedback and lower the sends again. And start building. But if I want more options, I can also use a second push button and send this over here. So I can map this to a button on my MIDI controller, and then I can decide for each drop whether I also want to mute the effects or keep the effects running. So that's really powerful. But yeah, for a delay I'm using Chrono Blob, so a really clean, simple delay. I'm using it in stereo mode, but you can also use ping pong mode. And the cool thing is that I can also mute the synths, so perfect for dub delays. Yeah, I'm using a plateau as a reverb, so the size and the decay are also knobs I may want to map. And yeah, of course, when you're done with your patch, don't forget to lock it. So go to View and lock positions, so you don't accidentally move modules around. But yeah, on the final output of the mixer, I'm using a limiter by Bock Audio, and this one sounds pretty transparent. So, useful to protect your outputs from clipping. But yeah, that's basically it so far. Alright, now let me give you a little jam with just my mouse to see how powerful this little setup already is. Right, you get the point. Now you can clearly see the limitations of just using a mouse. So yeah, I might add some more modules for the next week, but I mainly want to talk about mapping everything and creating macros. And I think I'm also going to use Shapemaster to create automated and synchronized filter sweeps, for example, since you only have 2 hands and you can't do everything at once. So, stay tuned for that. If you have any questions in the meantime, just let me know in the comments. And I'll see you next week with part 2 of this Modular Live Set series.